Loki's evil. Evil, I tell you.
Welcome. Welcome to 7 Kinds of Mischief!
I want to strangle you. I want to strangle you.
Yes! Yes!
Twisting the night away, you goof.
Twisting. Okay, so right before, like 20 seconds.
Evil.
20 seconds before we go live, I'm like, oh my God, Twisting the Night Away just popped into my head. Twisting,
Stop.
twisting the night away. Anyway, bow, boom,
That is tonight's scary show.
Twisting the night, yeah. Welcome back to 7 Kinds of Mischief, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, it is me and the one and only Doctor of Disaster and Destruction, Adega Outlaw. Greetings, brother.
I'm almost ready to leave. Don't do that. No, I'm kidding. That's contagious. Stop it.
Really quick, happy birthday to Pat S.
Happy birthday.
A real quick shout out to Pat S. Happy birthday, brother. Oh, man. I hope you guys are all doing well. I hope you're had a great birthday, Pat. Oh, shit.
He's here on his birthday? What the heck?
Yeah, I don't know. He needs to go.
Well, as long as you
out.
got a big piece of cake in front of your face while you're sitting here.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you, Arwen. Thank you, Catman, DD Myers. Thank you all for wishing Pat S. happy birthday. Oh, indigestion's killing me tonight. What
you get for
do we
singing?
have? I know. Well, it's not my fault. It just popped into my head.
Yeah, but you didn't have to share. That's the evil part.
Oh, Pat S has lights. Good deal. Good enough. He's like, I have lights. It's good enough for me. Heck yeah. Happy birthday, brother. Oh yeah. I'm glad you got lights. Is that hopefully that's because they turned the power on and it's not because of the generator. Hopefully they got power back on. So
Awesome.
So what do we have for everyone tonight, Adega?
I am going to go around this indirectly. I hope all of you have your, I always say, analytical minds and ability to infer out of what I will be implying so that no one gets shut down, no one gets checkmarked, no one has any repercussions. What you're looking at here, in case any of you haven't read it, back during World War I and World War II, some serious atrocities had happened. And we all know about them. And in order for people to, I should actually get you the link for that. People can look it up. In order for society to regain its humanity, some sense of humanity, there was what's called the Nuremberg Code. established in 1947. After trials and finding out things that various different countries had done, and we were one of the rest of the civilized world that adopted these codes that basically say, and the highlighted areas are some of the bigger ones, but basically what it says is you cannot experiment on people without their knowing. You cannot experiment people on them without there being a just cause. You cannot experiment people on them without them having a way to get out. There must be full disclosure and a reasonable cause. Anything else is in violation of the Nuremberg Code. It's all over the place. You guys can find it. It has the tenets there. It's supposed to have very severe penalties for those who break the code. So what I want to do is read how, well, we've talked about Germany. We talked about Japan. I didn't get into Korea, didn't get into South or in Asia, other places in Asia or down in Africa, different places. It seems like most places have problems. What we're going to talk about is what happened here in the U.S. I want to read half of an article in one place, and I'm going to skip one of the studies because it's so well known. You guys would know most of it. But this, what I'm reading from, is from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I want you to remember that everything that I will be going over is directly applicable to anything you could think about in modern society. Let me get my glasses on, see if I can read, since I got some stupid song spinning in the back of my head. I'm not dancing the night away. All right. Human experimentation and introduction to the ethical issue. In 1944, we're going to read a little bit more about this in a minute. This is before the Nuremberg Code. I don't know why I always do that. Code. I guess I've been in Wisconsin just a day too long. In January 1944, a 17-year-old Navy seaman named Nathan Schumann volunteered to be a test subject. And following orders, he donned a gas mask and special clothes and was escorted into a 10-foot by 10-foot chamber, which was then locked from the outside. Sulfur, mustard gas, lewisite, poisonous gases used in chemical weapons were released into the chamber, and for 1 hour each day for 5 days, the seaman sat in this noxious vapor. On the final day, he became nauseous. His eyes and throat began to burn. Sorry about the bang. And he asked twice to leave the chamber. Both times he was told he needed to remain until the experiment was completed. Ultimately, Schumann collapsed into unconsciousness and went into cardiac arrest. When he awoke, he had painful blisters on most of his body. He was not given any medical treatment and was ordered to never speak about it, what he had experienced, or under the threat of being tried for treason. For 49 years, these experiments were unknown to the public. The scandal unfolds. In 1993, the National Academy of Sciences exposed a series of chemical weapon experiments stretching from 1944 to 1975. This is the United States after the Nuremberg Code. And there's some interesting things about the date, which we'll get into in a minute, if I remember, which involved 60,000 American GIs. Some of you who have fathers who were in the military may know about this, and they may have hinted at it. At least 4,000 were used in gas chambers experiments, such as the one described above. In addition, more than 210,000 civilians and GIs were subjected to hundreds of radiation tests from the 1945 to 1962 years. Testimony delivered to Congress detailed the studies, explaining that these tests and experiments often involved hazardous substances such as radiation, blister and nerve agents, biological agents, and lysteric acid diethylamide. You guys know that, the LSD. We talked about how they used it for Project Monarch. It's not just Monarch. Either way, the mind control. Although some participants suffered immediate acute injuries and some died, in other cases, adverse health problems were not discovered until many years later, often 20 to 30 years or longer.
I think Adega was talking about MK Ultra. Yes?
Yes.
Is that the one?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Thank
didn't mean
you.
to interrupt.
No, you're good. You're good. I needed a breather anyway. These examples and others like them, such as the infamous Tuskegee, which I'm not going to read about because you guys all know about that. It went from 1932 to 1972, even after the Nuremberg Code. And the continued testing of unnecessary and frequently risky pharmaceuticals on human volunteers demonstrates the danger in assuming that adequate measures are in place to ensure ethical behavior in research. Yeah. Do you think there are safeguards in place? Loki, remind me. I want to talk about kids. Unnecessary, okay. And this one's important too, because this here is going to explain how drug companies make so much freaking money in one way. Sorry about the train in the background. A widespread ethical problem, although one that has not yet received much attention, is raised by the development of new pharmaceuticals. All new drugs are tested on human volunteers. There is, of course, no way subjects can be fully appraised of the risk in advance, as that is what the test purports to determine. That's why they call it testing, of course. This situation is generally considered acceptable, provided volunteers give informed consent. Many of the drugs under development today, however, offer little clinical benefits beyond those available from existing treatments. Did you catch that? Many are developed simply to create a patentable variation of an existing drug. It is easy to justify asking informed, consenting individuals to risk limited harm in order to develop new drugs, therapies for a condition from which they are suffering or for which existing treatments are inadequate. The same may not apply when the drug being tested offers no new benefits to the subjects because they are healthy volunteers, or when the drug offers no significant benefits to anyone because it is essentially a copy of an existing drug. Manufacturers, of course, hope that animal tests will give an indication of how a given drug will affect humans. However, a full 70 to 75% of drugs approved by the Food and Drug Administration, we were just talking about that, weren't we, Loki, for clinical trials based on promising results in animal tests ultimately prove unsafe or ineffective for humans. Even limited clinical trials cannot reveal the full range of drug risk. You can tell I can read this better because it's medical stuff. Health stuff I read pretty easily because that's what I've been doing most of my life. A U.S. General Accounting Office study reports that of the 198 drugs which entered the market between 1976 and 1985, 52% caused adverse reactions that pre-market tests failed to predict. So even if they are tested, half of them are still potentially very risky. That's one of the things that they do in these tests. They bring in all kinds of people for the test and this say, test study that this works. Well, the way they manipulate the test, and this is not in the article, they take in these people and they are allowed, which should not be, allowed a certain amount of leeway to eliminate certain groups within the test group. People start having adverse reactions, so they make up reasons to eliminate them from the test group. So you bring in 2,000 people to have the test. You have 500 that are having serious adverse reactions, another 200 that are having moderate reactions, and the rest are okay. These are all healthy people, usually. They don't often test them on people that are unhealthy. So not only is it skewed because they're testing it on healthy people, but it's also skewed because they eliminate, for one reason or another, the actual people that had the adverse reactions. And that's why when these things hit the market, 52% of the time, they fail their efficacy. Okay, this goes on to unnecessary experimentation on children. And then I'm going to end with this because it's, not my whole program, but this part of reading this article, because I want to get into some other stuff. Unnecessary And questionable human experimentation is not limited to pharmaceutical development. In experiments at the National Institutes of Health, a genetically engineered human growth hormone, or you guys know as HGH, is injected into healthy, short children. I remember these. Some of you who are older might remember these. Consent is obtained from the parents and affirmed by the children themselves. The children received 156 injections each year in the hope of becoming taller. Growth hormone is clinically indicated for hormone deficient children who would otherwise remain extremely short. Until the early 1980s, they were the only ones eligible to receive it because it was harvested from human cadavers. Supplies were limited. But genetic engineering changed that, and the hormone can now be manufactured in mass quantities. This had led to pharmaceutical houses to eye a huge population in the market, healthy children who are simply shorter than average. And it goes on to talk about the efficacy of this. There are adverse reactions. Here, I wanted to get into some of these strange, disgusting things that the United States government has done. I haven't investigated the British Isles or some of the other places that we have listeners from, but I do know this happened in the United States. This is not one on the list. This is one I wanted to bring up. There's a couple of them, but this one kind of gives you an idea. There were the turn of last century, and this was before Nuremberg codes again, but it shows the lack of humanity in some of these people. This one doctor decided, I am going to study children with stuttering problems. And they went and found, and this is the easiest way they can do it so they don't have to suffer any repercussions. They went and found about 500, if I got the numbers right, of orphan children, might have been 200, who half of them stuttered. And they put a couple of healthy kids in among the stutterers. And they did negative reinforcement, comparing the unaffected versus the affected. In the study group with the stutterers and a couple of non-stutterers, the non-stutterers became stutterers. The ones who stuttered before became worse, being told you're terrible people because of the repercussions of the stuttering. And when the study was done, they could not correct the damage that they did. And these were lifelong problems. And they use children because they're very easily molded. Now, I mentioned also when that study of the other experimentations had stopped in the 1970s. It was shortly after that, or around the same time, when Jimmy Carter had set up, it was shortly after that, the National Education Administration. I want you guys to put the links together, where they started unifying the education system and what the children were taught, instead of having it all in distinct, localized areas, their own histories, the different things. Over time, you've probably seen in the news how the children are being indoctrinated because they know it works on all fronts, instead of being taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. All right, let's go ahead and get into some of these other tests, and I'm going to call it good. Science is hard, and good science requires a lot of work to control variables and manage large amounts of data. This is actually kind of a cool article if you guys find it. Let me pull it up for you. This is 6 Most Evil Human Experiments Perpetuated by the United States Government by Richard Stockton. Sorry about the dog in the back. Medical science in particular usually calls for elaborate precautions to be taken, not just to ensure the accuracy of the data, but to protect the test subjects. People have rights, after all, and it's highly unethical to subject them to drug trials against their will or to poison them without consent to test a theory. The constraints make medical research one of the hardest of the fields to work in, since most experiments have to be done on animals and the findings are not necessarily applicable to humans. We already talked about that. Over the years, however, Some American medical researchers have deliberately violated the rules to gain the inside track to scientific knowledge, usually at horrific cost to the innocent people involved. The results of these human experiments were atrocious. It reminds me of one. This actually, and there's a lot of talk about the new Ghostbusters movie coming out. And you remember the Ghostbusters? They had the one scene where I don't remember the guy's name, but he was doing electric shock therapy on two students. One of them, he was lying. They're testing ESP. The other one, he kept shocking. There actually was a test on that after the Nuremberg, where this doc wanted to find out why in the world some people went along, and there was two tests that did this. Why they went along with the commands of some of these Nazi leaders. Why would they willingly hurt and kill people? And you guys know this test. I think most of you do, where they had a doctor, pretend doctor. They had someone come in who was to initiate or to give the test subject questions. And the test subject was actually an actor or actress hooked up to fake electricity. And there was a dial that turned up the intensity up to 10. 10 was supposed to be near deadly or deadly, cause a heart attack. The person who was reading the questions had no idea. So he'd read a question, the person would get it wrong, he would crank up the voltage. The actor would pretend like they're getting shot or shocked. And it continued until they got so high that most of the people that were running the questions objected, but the fake doctor insisted, said, you have to do this. And they continued. There were very few who did not, because they subjected themselves to an authority to hurt other people, which was shocking because they found out just about everybody put under pressure will go along with it. I hope you don't fall into that category. There's another related study where they took innocent people and threw them in prison, and how the prison guards were humiliating people and they got off on it after a while. It was really horrible. And some of you know that one too. Okay, let's continue on before I end this. It is a curious fact that after the horrors of World War I, chemical weapons seemed not to have been used during World War II. U.S. military officials in early part of World War II didn't know for sure that would be the case. Of course, and in 1943 or so, there was a legitimate fear among British and American leaders that Germany would turn to chemical weapons as the tide turned. The fear was a big part of the reason why the U.S. Army used its own soldiers for human experiments to test the effects of the mustard gas on. Well, we talked about the one guy who got the mustard gas, but there was a larger group that they also used, and they did the same thing, told them to keep silent. Let's move on. There was this one I want to read simply because you know what happened with the Tuskegee, but this one is Guatemala syphilis experiments. And there's some names here that you're going to recognize. And I am going to tie some loose ends here for you so you can understand the big picture, stuff that we talked about in the past. Disease has traditionally been more of a threat to the soldier than any weapon of the enemy. The American military in World War II was no exception, and by 1945, hundreds of thousands of men have been disabled by particularly embarrassing families of sicknesses, venereal diseases. After the war, government scientists, along with researchers from, catch these names, Johns Hopkins, the Rockefeller Foundation, and one of the predecessor company pharmaceutical giants, Bristol Myers Squibb, set out to study the spread of effects among other diseases, syphilis and gonorrhea. Unfortunately, they chose unwitting test subjects in Latin America for their human experiments, some of them children at the time. Early on, you guys can find out the turn of the last century, this is before World War I, Rockefeller actually set up the pharmaceutical industries, get them on their feet, and hid and this is where you hear these green witches and stuff. They actually know some of these things still. You have to search for it. The natural remedies that people had at the time, they hid them and said you must take certain pharmaceuticals, making them a lot of money. But Rockefeller was behind all of that. Little is known about the Guatemalan venereal disease study because the research generated no papers for peer review, and almost all government records were destroyed some years after the program concluded in 1956. We do know, however, that the project started with deliberate exposure of Guatemalan men to infected prostitutes. When that didn't spread the infections quickly enough, doctors from the project partnered with local physicians and inoculated patients with tinctures of infected material on the penis or by direct injections, sometimes to the spine. Children as young as 8 were given shots that were later discovered to have been hot with the STDs, and their health was then charted. Some subjects were given penicillin, which was already known to be effective in treating both types of STDs, but others were left untreated to study the progress of the damage caused by the infections. I can go on. This gets really sick. I'm a little flustered right now. It pisses me off. Let me read some of the titles. The ones: Human Experiments with Manhattan Project and Fatal Radiation, which you hear the Manhattan Project, but you probably didn't know that they were actually studying the effects of radiation, watching people die to see what the radiation did to our own people in the United States. Tuskegee, you know about. And now my computer froze up. Oh, come on. Well, there's a couple of others. It just drew a blank, and it's not bringing it up. Either way, when I get to the Nuremberg... here's one. Human Experiments in Dioxin Tests. And I have a picture of the doctor who deliberately... I'm going to read a quote from this guy. He was infecting people with dioxin digitalis, things that cause the skin to be brittle. These are his own words, and this was done in 81. All I saw before me, and he did this at a school, all I saw before me were acres of skin. It was like a farmer seeing a fertile field for the first time. And the last one was military poisoning, where they actually spread poison into San Francisco. They went out on ships, sprayed it into fog, and let it go in, and they watched the people go to the hospital. And even some people died. Yeah, that was us. All of which is against the Nuremberg Code, because none of these people gave consent to be damaged like this. They gave consent for certain specific reasons, which were all a lie. And again, I want, with all this information that I gave you tonight, to use your minds, see what's going on, realize that some things out there have not been tested, and some things out there are not effective for what they say they are. And be wise. That's all I got.
Damn straight. Thank you, brother. Thank you so very much. And thank you to Psycho9 with that $2 super chat. The Demon Core. Thank you to Darth Aster for your $2 super sticker. Thank you very much, guys. You all keep the fires burning bright here in Valhalla. Thank you so very much, gentlemen. So the story I've got for you guys tonight is something called The Chimney Man over at Creepypasta. I'm going to paste the story here. Let us begin. My dad built his dream cabin in the Southern Ozarks back in 1991, a reward to himself for achieving early retirement. The damn thing took nearly a year to build, with what the county having to actually build the road to my family's property at the top of a small mountain. I was 14 at the time. Yes, we were wealthy. But the cabin didn't reflect that. It was simple, unlike most of the monstrosities you see in places like Aspen these days. And at that age, I was ruined into thinking that I'd rather live in a city where I'd have an easier time being spoiled rotten. I despised being there, to say the least. We moved into the cabin in midwinter, a couple weeks before Christmas. Everyone was excited, except me. To be moving in to enjoy Christmas morning in front of the big-ass fireplace my dad gloated over. Amelia, my little sister, was 6 at the time, and she was elated that Santa would have such an easy entry point. Our old house didn't even have a chimney. Looking back, the first day was an omen. There's no way we could have known that. We pulled up to the cabin around noon on December 12th. My sister playing Kirby's Dream Land on her Game Boy and me listening to Nirvana on my Walkman. Yes, I said Walkman, get over it. Again, I was not excited. Mom and Dad were chipper, as usual, and it was getting on my nerves. My dad wouldn't shut up about how he'd had the fireplace took into the central system. Over and over and over again, he'd bring this up, so that all the heat would be distributed evenly through the house. We all began unloading what we had in the back of the Bronco, everything else having been moved in at great expense a few days before. My father's annoyingly happy face dropped into a mild frown when he shouldered open the front door. Looks like the movers didn't care too much about the new carpet, he said sarcastically. There in the living room, staring where the wood floors ended from the foyer, was a trail of footprints in the carpet, apparently made with soot, leading from just in front of the entry to the fireplace to the back door. I snorted at my father's comment, which earned me a side eye for the ages from my mom. We sat down what we were carrying in our respective rooms, and of course, I was tasked with cleaning up the mess, while my dad called the moving company to complain. While I was scrubbing and fuming, it occurred to me that if the footprints were in fact soot, that would be hard to explain why the fireplace had already been used in a brand new cabin. At the time, I assumed that there had been a test run by the builder to ensure everything was in working order. It took me about an hour to bring the carpet to my parents' satisfaction, and then I promptly went to my new room to continue wallowing in my teenage angst, listening to Nirvana on my Walkman. Yes, I said Walkman. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched in the shower, that someone was standing just on the other side of the curtain. I tried to ignore it, but the feeling worsened when I closed my eyes to wash my hair and face. Finally, I pulled back the curtain, feeling foolish for being such a wimp. Of course, I found nothing unusual. I wrote my paranoia off as just being pissed off on the move and didn't think much about it. I didn't have another strange encounter for several days, but about a week after I got the shower stalker vibe, Amelia let my mom and I know about her new friend at the breakfast table. How did everyone sleep last night? My mother asked, trying to get through my solemn disdain. Fine, I replied through a mouthful of scrambled eggs. I played with the man behind the curtains, Amelia exclaimed. I told him that he would be in big trouble if he kept getting the rug dirty. Oh, that's wonderful, sweetie, my mom said. I'm glad you've made a friend. Tell them I said thank you for not getting any more stains on the carpet. It made me bitter, listening to my mom placate my sister while I was in social isolation. Mom just kept sipping her coffee and reading the newspaper that Dad paid extra to have delivered out that far into the wilderness. There was no fear in my sister's voice, and neither of us even remotely considered the possibility that her new friend was anything more than her imagination. Later that day, I was taking some folded laundry to my sister's room. I put it in her drawer, turned to walk out, and I saw them. 2 charcoal shoe prints under the window curtain, as if someone had been hiding there. Initially, I disregarded them as leftovers from the moving crew. Just like the others, I ignored them. Let Mom clean it up, I thought to myself. but it kept nagging at me. I'd helped Amelia get settled into her room. I would have noticed them. They weren't there before. I still don't know why, but I never told my parents about them. I ultimately did go back to clean them up and carried on. Amelia surely had made them somehow as part of her relationship with her new friend. That night, on December 23rd, I had trouble sleeping. The feeling that I was being watched had returned shortly after the discovery in Amelia's room. And I hadn't been able to shake it. I hadn't admitted it to myself yet, but a microscopic part of my imagination had begun to suspect something was wrong. At 14, I still hadn't quite squashed my fear of ghosts. Kept looking across the room into the back of my open closet, half expecting someone to be standing there, some fucking clown or the shoes covered in black dust. I felt shame for being scared. But finally, I drifted off sometime around midnight. I still can't remember what woke me. I just know that my sheets were damp with sweat when I came to. I felt again that I was being watched, and I began scanning the room through my blurry, just woke up vision. I followed my curtains down to the floor and saw them. Soiled black feet poking out from beneath them. I jumped up, rubbed my eyes, and looked back. There were no shoes, but the curtain was moving ever so slightly. I looked at my closet door, which had been shut without a sound. I pulled my blankets over my head, knowing that if I pulled them down, something would be there, sitting at the end of my bed. After a while, I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. Of course, I was blamed the next day for the dirty tracks to and from my room. They began and ended in front of our fireplace, just like the first time. They clearly led to my bedroom closet and back. My parents gave me a big speech about how I needed to accept my new circumstances and start treating everyone and everything with a lot more respect. I didn't have the energy to fight with them at the time. All I could think about were the footprints and the thing that had spent the night in my room with me while I cowered under my fucking blanket. I just rolled my eyes and accepted my punishment. I cleaned up the prints and then no Walkman until I straightened up. Yes, I said Walkman. It wasn't like they'd believe me, so why say anything? I scrubbed the carpets that day in a daze, remembering what Amelia had said a few days before at breakfast. My thoughts raced for a rational explanation to this, but I kept arriving at this strange amalgamation of ghosts and fucking Santa Claus. Despite everything going on, I still had Christmas morning on my mind. Just like anyone that age, yet by the time I had finished cleaning, I resigned myself to try and sort out what the hell was going on. I would start with my sister. That night, after an almost silent dinner, I went to Amelia's room to do some gentle prying. As I ran up the doorframe, I found her staring up at the ceiling vent. The floor around her bed was covered in that morning's newspaper. What the hell is this? I asked, trying to remain calm despite already knowing the answer. For the man that likes to hide in the curtains, she almost whispered. I told him I would keep the floor clean. He doesn't like leaving tracks because he's afraid I'd have to leave if Mommy and Daddy found out about him. He said that if I did that for him, he'd take me to visit his house. He said there are lots of other kids there I can play with. All of this, she said, as a matter of fact, as if she and the man had been friends for years and I should just know this shit. I almost lost what little cool I had left, my eyes widening and my mouth opening to scorn her for being so dumb. But I caught myself, resolving to try and solve the mystery on my own. Without shaming a 6-year-old, as appalling as it was, I decided to use my sister as bait to catch whoever, what the fuck ever, was leaving the damn footprints in the carpet and possibly planning a kidnapping. Okay, I began. Just make sure you tell Mom and Dad that all the newspapers for watercolors are some bullshit. That way they don't get suspicious. I will, she replied enthusiastically. Thank God Amelia was 6 and didn't need a lot of explanation. I left her room with terrified curiosity, wondering what Christmas Eve would have in store for all of us at the Hell House. For what seemed to be the 100th time, I lay in bed, unable to fall asleep. I watched my clock tick tock for seconds, minutes, hours. I knew that should anything actually arrive in Amelia's room, I'd hear the crumpling of paper. I also knew that Amelia would be awake, desperate not only for her new friend to come out, but also for the sound of sleigh bells and jingle bells and fucking Rudolph and Frosty on the roof. Just as I began to drift off, sometime around 1 a.m, I heard it. The sound of rustling newspaper. I hoisted myself out of a sleeping awake twilight I was in, ejected myself from the bed, too stricken with urgency to consider being quiet. I landed on the floor with a thud and immediately heard my sister whine from across the hall. "Please don't go, come back," she cried. I raced out of my bedroom, older sibling protective instincts at full tilt, and into the hallway just in time to be stopped in my tracks. A tall, willowy silhouette stood at the living room end of the hallway. The thing stood so tall that it stooped, bending at the ceiling, using its long, spindly arms to brace against the walls. The lunar glow coming in through the skylight was just enough to show me that it was uniformly pale, almost paper white, and it wasn't wearing any clothes. I stared up at what I thought should be its face, its lack of feature slightly disorienting. It had 2 indentations where there should have been eyes, as if there were once sockets, but skin had been stretched over them. I thought I saw a small slit that must have been its mouth. I began to notice that its body was thin, almost 2-dimensional. And then it fucking moved. I gasped as it moved with unnatural motion, as if its joints were the result of being creased and folded into a fucking box, using its abnormally gangly arms to balance on the floor and lurch to the living room. For a moment, I considered just going back to my room, saying fuck it and climbing under my covers and hiding like a little bitch, but I'd come too far. I summoned what little courage I had and edged towards the living room, peeking around the corner of the hallway. In the moonlight, I followed the trail of grayish footprints with my eyes up to the fireplace, where the twin doors into the hearth stood open. I caught a glimpse of a limb being retracted up into the chimney. I just stared. I didn't dare move, not daring to breathe too loudly or deeply, and the fucking thing would hear me, lest it come back. Amelia was the one that broke me from the trance. "Don't hurt him," she whispered meekly from behind me. I spun around, scared to fucking death, my heart thumping in my chest. We locked eyes for a moment, me not believing what I've seen, Amelia not comprehending why I seemed so disheveled. Finally, I found the words. "Go back to fucking bed," I stammered. "No, he won't hurt you, he won't," she stared up in tears. I kept finding myself unable to speak, as if this thing in our fireplace had stolen my fucking vocabulary. I just kept standing there, watching Amelia weep as if I was taking away a new puppy. In my head, I was sprinting, trying to weigh out the options. I took Amelia by the hand and went to the hallway closet for my dad's maglite. I crept back to the fireplace, Amelia mercifully not biting my grip. I sat for a moment. "Amelia, if anything happens when I look up into the chimney, you run and you wake up Mom and Dad. Do you understand?" Amelia nodded. I took a deep breath and I leaned back into the fireplace as I turned on the flashlight and looked up. A sheet white face met mine. The creature hanging upside down and craning its neck to face me. There were no eyes, but a round black hole for a mouth gaping to reveal a seemingly bottomless oblivion. I scrambled out of the hearth and collapsed there in the floor, waiting for it to come out after me as my chest heaved. But it never did. At some point, I got up, ignoring my sister's questions and pleading as a numb, thoughtless fucking state came over me. I took the fireplace matches, doused the carpet in lighter fluid from a kitchen cabinet, and set the whole fucking carpet ablaze. That place be damned. Amelia and I never told our parents what happened. And I can't remember much of what happened in the immediate aftermath. After hundreds of hours of therapy, the only solid thing I can retrieve after looking up that chimney that horrifying Christmas morning is sitting out in the snow with my family, pulling my knees to my fucking chest as we waited for the first fire department to get there from a distant town. Amelia wailing about her friend burning alive. By the time the fire trucks got there, the cabin had burned to the fucking ground. None of the firemen even bothered turning on their hoses. The therapists tell me my parents that I've got repressed memories as a result of being so miserably sequestered from society at the time when social development is paramount. What a bunch of fucking horseshit. Amelia wouldn't talk to me for a long time because from her perspective, I'd murdered her new fucking friend, the guy climbing up into the fucking chimney. A few years later, she began to comprehend. We talked, we reconciled, and we agreed never, ever to speak of that insane night ever again. The fire was attributed to a likely electrical problem within the system that distributed the heat from the fireplace. Small town forensic scientists don't know their assholes from their elbows. My parents never quite understood, while Amelia was convinced that I'd caused the fire when the fire department just said otherwise. It strained us for a while, but eventually, I guess, they just let it go as Amelia's vivid imagination. The day after, we were allowed to sift through the smoldering rubble to try and salvage anything we could. All that we found were a set of footprints that led into the woods and didn't return to the house. We followed them, but eventually they disappeared abruptly. My parents don't know who they could have possibly belonged to. But Amelia and I do.
It's like I always say, burn it all down!
Burn it
Burn
fucking down.
Torch it!
Oh, I tried to channel my 14-year-old, ladies and gentlemen. What would 14-year-old
I like that kid.
Loki? What would the 14-year-old Loki do? Yes, I said Walkman. I listened to Nirvana. I listened to Nirvana. So, oh shit! That was a good one. That was a good one.
What better way to end a story than with fire?
And we still don't talk about that night. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, all I do is read the first paragraph. I had no idea he was going to burn the whole fucking house down. So,
let me see. There's kids who get put in bad situations. That kind of went along with what I did. There's fire, which I like. You got your fire dragon up there in the upper right corner. That was all good night. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. No, this is great.
I'm still trying to put other songs in my head instead of dancing
night away, dancing, dun, 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 yeah, twisting. Yes, absolute. Dun, 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 dun. I can see Adega already on the horn. Oh my God! Yes.
See, this is what happens when Loki has a nap.
Oh shit! We will be back, ladies and gentlemen, next week. Oh, with more Adega Outlaw. I can't wait. I absolutely cannot wait. You guys, there's a reason why we keep doing this, because I love doing these. I absolutely love doing these. I love hanging out with Adega. I love telling creepy, weird ass fucking stories about, people burning their shit down. Absolutely.
I saw Pat S say that he likes the scary more than the disturbing. Maybe I'll have to bring something scary next week.
Yes.
Tell you what, though, it is an honor and a privilege, and I'm always grateful that you have me come and visit the family once a week on Thursday evenings.
Well, we love having you, brother. We absolutely love having you. Arwen Avalon says, thank you, Loki and Adega. Thank you for being here, guys. Thank all of you for being here. Thank you, Adega, for taking time out to be here tonight and every Thursday. I know we missed one last week, but thank you. Thank you for being here. I love getting to do these with you, and I wouldn't pass it up for anything.
Wow, this is great stuff. At least we enjoy it. Everyone else is along for the ride, and glad you're here.
That's right. Everybody else is along for the ride. Everybody take care. Have a great one. We'll be talking space above and beyond in the morning with the regular panel. Take care, everybody. Have a great one and be excellent to each other.
These videos are tremendous. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hammer that notification bell.